question is, how is Australia changing? And you start with population, the first P. Life expectancy is increasing, as you can see. The good news is that by the middle of this century, it's expected that a child born will live to 100. And that's quite remarkable, given that 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, life expectancy was around 55. It is a dramatic change. The historic numbers are obviously quite different to the projections. The age pension eligibility age should better reflect increases in life expectancy. That is where life expectancy has been, and that's the age pension eligibility age. You can see the increase in the age pension eligibility age was actually introduced by Labor to go to people to the age of 67. We continued that trajectory to go to 70, the same trajectory, and obviously they're opposing it, but you can see that the gap there is still very significant given what the forecast life expectancy is. And particularly this excludes technological change, so if you take it to 100, the gap is even larger. The number of centenarians, it's an extraordinary story. There are only 100 in 1971. There's going to be 40,000 in 2050. Now, what does that mean? Well, there'll be fewer people aged between 15 and 64 relative to each person aged over 65. 65 is traditional working age. Obviously, that is changing. But in 1970, there were the equivalent of 7.5 people for everyone aged over 65. It's currently 4.5, and it's dropping to nearly 3. Migration as a share of the population is anticipated to fall. Now, you can see the averages in various points. After World War II, we had around 1% of population per annum, down to 0.5%. In more recent times, again during the mining boom, it went back up to 1.1%. But as Labor forecast in the last IGR, they said over the medium term it would go to 180,000 a year. We're suggesting over the medium term it would be about 215,000. So we're higher than what they forecast in 2010. Population growth will be slightly lower or slower over the next 40 years, but it's essentially pretty much the same at around 1.3, 1.4%. And again, you can see the change in the population is not making a huge difference to the wealth of the nation as it stands. The second part is participation. Participation rates will decline as a result of the population getting older. Now, as you can see, that increase has happened in recent times, but it's expected to come off quite significantly. That does have an impact on wealth creation in the economy. Aged over 65 is a remarkable story. As you can see, the bottom of the point in 2003, that was when it started to pick up. Older Australians started to go to work because there was full employment. Employers were working harder to create the jobs for older Australians. And then when the GFC hit, they stayed in work because their asset values and income fell during the GFC. The trend is continuing, but this is the grey army that is going to deliver prosperity in Australia's future. And we need older Australians, we want older Australians, if they choose to do so, to remain in the workforce and to come back into the workforce. And that is where there's going to be a lot of structural effort over the next few years. There is potential to lift participation. As you can see, the green is Australia, the red is Canada, and the blue is New Zealand. New Zealand has a much higher male workforce participation rate. New Zealand government hasn't got compulsory superannuation, so people have a need to continue to work. It's also the case that they removed discriminatory policy towards older workers. But the interesting one is female workforce participation. This is a debate we truly need to have. Again, the second major army that we have of potential workers is women coming back into the workforce, particularly after having children. There's much debate about what's going to change that. You can see Canada and New Zealand are well ahead of Australia in terms of female workforce participation. There's a debate about what it is. In Quebec, apparently they have childcare that's $5 a day. Does that increase workforce participation? Is it more flexible workplace environments? There are many factors that are in play, and my colleague Scott Morrison is addressing this particular issue at this very moment in our families package. But it can make a massive difference to the wealth of a nation in terms of participation. But even then, they're not the biggest contributors to what is going to be our wealth as individuals. The third area is productivity, and by far the most important. Productivity is how much output we have per hour of work. And our productivity as a nation has grown significantly over the years. In fact, compared with 1972, we are producing twice as much in 1 hour as an individual than we did in 1972. Our productivity assumption is the big if for the next 40 years. The 30-year average is 1.5% that we've taken for this document. You can see the surge in the 1990s as a result of reforms that were undertaken. You can see it was much lower in the 80s, so that was when Australia had to make the significant changes, structural changes, to deliver productivity growth. We're assuming the same going forward, 1.5%. As you can see from this graph, productivity improvements are the biggest contributor to the increase in real GDP per person. That is how much we earn, how much we get, how much money we have in our pockets. And that's why labour productivity, as well as capital productivity, labour productivity is hugely important for our future. Projected economic growth is only going to be marginally lower over the next 40 years. And that's based on the best assumption. That's based on the economic inputs. So the key drivers of productivity, investment in new capital and infrastructure, absolutely essential that we do that. Innovation and technology is going to completely change the way we live our lives. When you think about it, 10 years ago, you might not have had access to the same sort of technology you have access to today, quite obviously, such as accessibility on mobile phones. Apps weren't around 10 years ago. When Peter Costello delivered the first Intergenerational Report, Mark Zuckerberg had never even thought of Facebook. So there's been massive changes in technology, and technology is moving faster than ever before, which is really exciting for Australia and exciting for our future, because it's broken down the traditional barriers of distance, and it's also smashing the barrier of regulation, because technology, new technology means consumers are empowered so much so that they are smashing the traditions that are part of our economy, like licensing systems. You look at whether it be broadcasting licences, gaming licences, taxi licences, they're being challenged by disruptive technology. When you look at other parts of our lives that are being absolutely turned on their heads by technology and new innovation, it means we've got an opportunity to get much more bang for our buck through innovation. Medical research is hugely important. That's why we are determined to stick with our Medical Research Future Fund, because that's going to delay the ageing process. We'll live longer, but it's actually going to give us a better quality of life into the future. Entrepreneurship and competition. We are entering into a generation of small business like never before. It is going to be the innovative hub of the economy, and of course skills and education. Various points during our lives we're going to have to reskill, and that means we've got to take a new approach to education over the medium and long term. We've got to take a new approach to the moments when we're not going to be in the workforce. Of course, we are obligated under the Act to deal with the existing position of government policy, and it's vitally important that we be able to afford our future as a nation. What this report shows is that we have come a considerable way, but more needs to be done.